the health anxiety is running through my head like a freight train here at the moment. But
because things like this and all the rest of my implants, because of the fact that they're inside my body, they are covered in the United States by HIPAA.
So what made you decide to want to become R2D2?
I credit my first network hack to that class, and I wound up stealing all that stuff and selling it on the side and made a really good side living, my last 3 years of high school. Unfortunately, the criminal acts eventually wound up leading me to being incarcerated for a couple of years.
How painful is it for you on a scale of stepping on Lego and then having to sit through a Carolina Panthers game?
All of the things that we think that make us unique are now being exploited as marketing tools. Hello, Dr. So-and-so. Yes, I'd like to schedule an appointment. What do I need? Oh, well, you see, I went online to this website and I bought this thing, and they shipped it to me, and I want you to cut me open and put it in my... Hello? Hello? Wait, oh, you're back. What's that? You're transferring me to the psych department?
So what made you decide to want to become RD?
Well, if you ask me, it was probably a combination of a lot of different things. The first being the fact that, I saw Star Wars for the first time when I was very young, and I remember thinking the idea of not just the Force, but just the cybernetics and the robots. It turned me into a complete sci-fi geek for the rest of my life. I spent most of my childhood as one of those kind of nerdy kids that would just want to tear things apart. My degree and what I was studying was actually industrial drafting. I wanted to be like an architect or an engineer. And I realized this was back on a token ring network. And a lot of your listeners will have to go back and look into the archives, maybe go hit Wikipedia or something and look up what a token ring was. BNC connectors and coax. Yeah, I know. I'm old. Deal with it. But, I was taking a drafting course and realized that if you search the network, this was long before, people understood the concepts of security on networks and passwords. Our teacher had every one of our tests, the final exams, all sitting in a folder that was completely wide open. So I credit my first network hack to that class, and I wound up stealing all that stuff and selling it on the side and made a really good side living, my last 3 years of high school. Unfortunately, the criminal acts eventually wound up leading me to being incarcerated for a couple of years, got out of that, and, wound up gravitating towards motorcycle gangs. So again, it was one of the only things you really had to do to fit in there was just be willing to drink, act like a jerk, and go with the flow. So that became my life for the next, 10, 15 years or so. And it wasn't until I had my first granddaughter that I looked at my life and realized that everything that I was doing was not productive, and I was not a good example. And my entire persona just shattered in that moment. And I remember looking at this infant and not being able to not see every mistake that I had made with my own children, society, and my life. So I made it a promise that day in that hospital room that, I was going to change. So I quit the gangs. I was able to get out in good standings. So I have no problems with them. And I decided to take all of the skills that I had learned over the years of committing cyber crime, and I decided to put that into cyber defense. And I actually started going to work for an Israeli cybersecurity company that I stayed with for about the next 11 years. During that time, I've been able to travel all over the world as a technical evangelist. I presented research in 73 different countries. I've presented in front of the European Union ministries and multiple cyber emergency response team meeting conferences for the Baltic states as well as the European Union. In terms of to finalize your initial question of what would make me want to become R2D2, it was actually a fluke. I was actually in Amsterdam, and as a lot of people collect spoons or shot glasses, of different places, I collect stickers from tattoo parlors. So I remember I was sitting at a tattoo parlor off of one of the canals in Amsterdam, and I heard somebody talking about a different piercing parlor at the next town down the railroad track called Utrecht, where the piercer was actually implanting RFID and NFC microchips. And my antennas went, now we're talking about something. Because prior to that, I want to say it was around 2013 to 2015, there was a group here in America called Grindhouse Wetware. And this was a group of individuals who's tried to make consumer grade implantable electronics for the consumer market. And they had created a implant that goes in the top of the hand called the North Star that would actually glow with LEDs and it would make you look like Iron Man. And I remember at the time thinking, okay, this is cool, but I'm a criminal hacker. The idea of putting like a neon sign on my hand that says, hey, look, I'm different, really didn't work for me trying to stay in the shadows. But it never left my mind. And I remember not being able to make it down to that other tattoo parlor on that trip. But as soon as I got back to my hotel room, I was on the internet and I discovered that there is a company based out of Seattle, Washington, here in the United States called dangerousthings.com. And they sell consumer grade implantable electronics. Everything from near field communication, which is the same technology that we have in our phones that allows us to tap to pay with our phones. They also had radio frequency. They actually had the ability to put access cards, for buildings or shared storages, garages. You could put these onto an implant and then you could actually use those instead of the physical key. You could get a Tesla car key and have it implanted, sync that to the valet key on your Tesla, and you can actually just get in your car and drive. So there was all kinds of different options. And as soon as I got back to the United States, I ordered my first two. And, this is just a quick little byproduct that I like to tell people. We all had to suffer through that thing a couple of years ago called COVID. Excuse me, COVID. And if you remember, there were all those rumors running around the internet going, oh, they're putting implants in us. They're implanting us with trackers or something. Well, let me tell you, as somebody who has multiple implants, the size of the needle that is used for these is bigger than like a standard writing pen. And I have no doubt in my mind that if all of us were going in to get our vaccination shots and they came in with something that looked like a big pen, the adoption rate for that vaccine would have been much, much lower. So, that's one of the things that I like to dispel. There's a whole bunch of other rumors that hopefully we can dispel before the end of this conversation. But no, I went in and I had these two devices implanted. And the first one was a combination RFID and an NFC chip. And the other one was actually a crypto bionic chip, which allowed me to authenticate myself on websites and things through a subdermal implant. So it enhanced my security online on one side, but it also gave me the ability to use the near field communication chip to actually attack people's cell phones. The near field NFC will do more than just allow you to tap to pay. There are what are called NFC tags or built-in routines. One of them is connect me to a specific website, connect me to a specific Wi-Fi network. So what I did is started using those types of actions to redirect people's mobile devices to malware-infected websites. If you're using an Android phone, I can actually point it at an infected APK, which is the installation packages for the Android phones, and I can actually download a piece of software and install it on a target's phone in less than 12 seconds. And when I hand the phone back, it's like I have a remote connection into that phone and I can download pictures, I can read your messages, I can check your call logs. And if you're using software that connects you back to your company, I can potentially take that in connection and from your phone, get right back into the entire enterprise that you work with. And then I also started looking around and realized that they had physical access implants. So your badge that you use to get into your building at work, I can skim that, write that down to this implant right here for any of your viewers watching. what I can do is I can actually leave all the rest of my tools and things out in my car, walk up and just go right into your building. And the thing that's really going to frighten people is what I'm going to say next. So let's say I'm in your building and you catch me. What do you think is going to happen when the authorities get there? Nothing. And the reason why is because things like this and all the rest of my implants, because of the fact that they're inside my body, they are covered in the United States by HIPAA, which is our health and privacy, and in Europe via GDPR. This is considered medical and health data, which means the authorities are not allowed to ask me about it.
That's amazing. That's actually insane when I think about it. I never even put that together. But yeah, I don't know what's more groundbreaking, that or the fact you've dispelled COVID in a sentence. But I do obviously, there's loads of things here now we need to go on to and loads of things about it. But when you were talking about, yeah, there we go.
Magnets in the fingers. And here's before we get into your question, I want to, the reason I brought this up is because this is actually, if you ask me, this is the one implant that has had the most significant change to my life. It may look like a little bar trick. It doesn't have enough weight to pick up anything really heavy. But what it does do is, due to the number of nerve endings in the tips of your fingers, by implanting a magnet, I actually have an additional sense that I wasn't born with. So I have the senses of sight, hearing, taste, touch, but I can also feel electromagnetic fields and currents now, because any movement to that magnet, even no matter how slight, with the total amount of nerve endings that are there, I feel it almost like a spidey sense. But what it does is it makes me extremely acutely aware of what our bodies are being subjected to in terms of transmissions and different energy fields that we're going through every day that most people would never understand.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense, with the nerve endings, because I was thinking about that originally with, obviously with these implants, it's not just that they give you, technical abilities that other people don't have, but they're obviously going to have some kind of lasting effect. The first question I want to ask you is, anybody who's got crippling health anxiety like me, this is whirling around our heads massively. The actual procedure itself of getting this implant done, how painful is it for you on a scale of stepping on Lego and then having to sit through a Carolina Panthers game? Like, how are we getting here?
Well, the answer to that is pain, in my opinion, is a very uniquely personal experience. You can ask me how painful it is because, the truth is none of these were put in by a doctor, and like we were talking before we started recording, I want to run your listeners through this. So imagine what that phone call would be like. Hello, Dr. So-and-so. Yes, I'd like to schedule an appointment. What do I need? Oh, well, you see, I went online to this website and I bought this thing and they shipped it to me and I want you to cut me open and put it in my... Hello? Hello? Wait, oh, you're back. What's that? You're transferring me to the psych department? With medical malpractice, first and foremost, no doctors will look at us unless it's to take one of these out.
Yeah.
So all of the implants are done through the same people that you would go to for body modification. And I'm saying that specifically because I do not want people to think that if you're a body piercer or a tattoo artist, that makes you a body mechanic. They are not the same things. So body piercers are people that will pierce your ears, they'll pierce your septum, whatever. Body mechanics are the ones that will gauge your ears. They're the ones that will split the tongue so that it looks like a snake. They're the ones that will put the coral underneath the skin to make someone look like they have horns. This is not the same thing. The next thing, at least as far as the United States is concerned, there is no anesthetic for any of these. Because of the licensing requirements within the US, you need a minimum of a nurse's license in order to be able to administer anesthetic. So every one of these has actually been done completely stone cold sober with no painkillers at all. Now, when we talk about that, there's two different types of installations you can do. The first one, well, these are actually more tied to the different styles of implant. You have two basic styles. You have what is called a bioglass, and then you would have what is called a flexible membrane. The bioglass literally looks like a piece of long grain rice. Excuse me. I want to say it's 2 millimeters in diameter by about maybe that big. So it's very, very small. And it actually comes preloaded into a syringe with like I said, that needle that's about the size of a pen. And these were the first types of implants that I got. I actually have two of these style, and the installation, we call it installation. We don't call it surgery or anything. The installation for these is very simple. You basically just pinch the skin, tent the skin, the needle goes in, push the plunger, pull it out. The whole process is done, I would say, probably in less than 4 seconds. It's very quick. Does it hurt? If you've ever had, your tongue pierced or, an industrial piercing in your ears, it's about the same. It's a sharp, intense pain, but as soon as they pull it out, it's basically done and over with. They put a little Band-Aid over the top, you're out the door in less than 4 minutes. The second type is more akin to an actual surgical procedure where there are scalpels, dermal elevators. So, for example, this chip that I have here is the largest one that I currently have. This is called a Flex Next. This is a combination RFID and NFC chip. And the reason it's so large is I needed something that the coil that was going to create the energy field was big enough that when I held a cell phone, it would read through my hand to be able to hit that sensor so I could hack phones and not have to go, I got to get it on the sensor, because that really doesn't, again, very, very not good for staying undetected. But when it comes to the large ones like this, they literally made an incision here along the edge of my hand and then use what are called dermal elevators. And these look like medieval torture tools. And their purpose is to separate the dermal layer of skin from the muscle tissue below. Because if you really take a close look there, you'll see that my veins are actually above the implant. So this is actually between the muscle layer of skin and the actual dermal layer of skin. And then the reason you would do that, because these are flat. They're not encased in glass. They're covered in a biologically approved membrane that will not be counterproductive to the body. Then you put a little skin glue on there and you wait for it to heal and off you go. And then the last option is the same thing, but now they've made the implants much, much smaller. So you can see here just this little teeny one right there. That is actually a credit card. And that uses a little bit larger, almost like piercing needle, and they just make the hole, pull the needle out, put the chip in, little skin glue, you're out the door. And the reason I switched from the bioglass to the flexible membrane is I put one bioglass right up here between my knuckles, and I've found it down here at my wrist. So I do have to constantly make sure that it goes back up because they do have a tendency to migrate, whereas the membranes stay exactly where you put them.
That's giving me the shivers about having to move that right in your hand. Oh, it's giving me a bit. But you went in a little bit of detail of what they do and stuff, and we will get into more detail. But I'm more like trying to think from like the normal person standpoint. Maybe someone like me who has no idea about these technologies that advancedly. But how convenient is it in your actual everyday life? I know you've mentioned getting in the buildings without having to do anything, and you're able to like see like malware and stuff. But how convenient is it like everyday normal life?
Well, I was about to give you an example. So everyone, whether you're in tech or not, pretty much everybody understands what a one-time password is. You may not know it
Yeah.
by the term OTP, but every time you try to go log into your Google account and it sends your phone something that you have to verify, or the same with your iPhone when it sends you that, push notification that says, "Hey, is this really you trying to get in here?" That is multi-factor authentication. Like I said, I do have multiple chips that I use for offensive purposes, but I also mentioned that I use them for my own defensive purposes online as well. So this is just my cell phone, and this is a tool called the VivoKey Apex. And this implant is right here in my arm. And if I take this, trying to keep it up there so everybody can see it, of course, this is what happens when you try and do things live. All right, where is it again? Okay, right there. This is my newest chip. So, okay, so there we go. So now, once I've authenticated, this is where I get my one-time OTP passwords. So see, there's the password to get into my
Yeah.
GitHub. This will also do is the key for my BIP32 wallet. It will do HMAC SHA-1. It can actually work as a FIDO key. It'll do PGP. And as I said, you can actually put your car key on here, along with several other functions. The idea, how does it help me in my everyday? It actually helps secure me online much with a much greater effort than any other product could. There are other companies out there that offer the same kind of, one-time password kind of thing, but it's not biologically connected to an individual. If somebody steals that phone, somebody is able to, compromise that phone, there is the chance that somebody may be able to try and gain access to those codes. Same with my crypto wallet. I use that on a daily basis to keep me more secure. And the one thing that, I'd like to throw out there is as just food for thought. We're dealing today with AI, large language models, machine learning. And one of the things that I keep resonating in my head is most people have seen the movie The Matrix. And if you remember it from The Matrix, we couldn't see, the GUI, because all we saw was the code because the GUI was meant to work for the machine.
Yeah.
We are now dealing with large language models. We are no longer putting code in to get results out. We are dealing with language. We now have an abstraction layer between the individual and the technology. Is it going to be somebody like me who does have the ability to continue to talk to the machines on over natural protocols? Is this somebody like me going to be a necessity for the human to remain relevant in a new advanced technical future?
Like it's almost like every day tech advances more and more beyond what we've ever seen, and there's there's these so many now at the moment. Like I don't know if the guy is watching, but there's a guy who follows my Substack who sent me an article and some videos about like somewhere in Europe they're testing out like almost like robotic dogs to see if dog parks are safe. Like they put in new elevations and stuff. And I hope he's not watching because he terrified the shit out of me all weekend. But I almost sit and think now, listen, you, how far into the future do you think it'll be before these things are really common?
Oh, I honestly, I really felt that with the credit card implant that I have is called the Wallet More. And this is one of the few chips that I have right now that is currently dead. The company that was backing the chip actually went bankrupt. But I had really thought that this was going to be the chip that was going to break the stigma. When we talk about implantation, if you look at Sweden, Sweden actually allowed their citizens to get implanted as part of their national identification program. So it worked so well that they even included the ability to put your metro on that implant. So there are some countries that have already implemented this on a national level. There was a company here in the United States that tried it. I think they were called Foursquare Market or something like that. I'd have to go back and look at specifically. But this company offered microchipping to their employees as a way of dealing with time and attendance. It wasn't mandated, and the people in the United States the media completely lost their minds. They were like, "Well, now it's going to be you have to get a microchip if you want to work here," and it went into this whole human rights thing. So the one thing I will say, I don't think anybody should be forced to ever do anything that is against their will, but I do think that we are going to see a lot more people like me in less than, you said how long? I would say within the next 5 to 7 years, we're going to start seeing more of it. And the reason I say that is we're seeing more and more discussions around things like brain computer interfaces on the daily. Things like Neuralink. And if you want to ask, if you ask me, Neuralink really isn't even the one that we need to be watching, because Neuralink, in my opinion, is not really leading the charge in the technology. Neuralink is following the same pattern as all of the other brain computer interfaces, or what came before them, when that was called BCMs, or brain computer machines. Companies like BlackRock Neuroscience, BrainGate, things of that nature. And they all still require open skull surgery in order to plant electrodes. Whereas there's another company based out of Melbourne, Australia called Synchron. And these guys are doing a stent methodology where they're going in through an artery up into a capillary in the brain and then expanding on the inside like a stent or a catheter. Lower risk to the patient, lower entry point of skills for the surgeon. And these guys have done more than 7 human trials. So I think the fact that we're continuing to push the line of what is possible with connections to the brain, I think that the additional implants are going to just follow suit as a natural progression.
People probably think, like when you said about the credit card scanner in your hand, they probably think that's insane. I can't be that quick. But you think of how quick Apple Pay or all those things
Hmm.
came about. They was almost like overnight. And that, to be honest, whenever I like was looking you up, that was the one that fascinated me the most because I do see that one coming really, really quick. But there's a question that's been on my mind at the start, and I don't know how to. I'm trying to think of a way to like frame it in a like so people would understand, but I don't think there is. These chips, like you mentioned, you got a new one, and there's one that's it's now like not really working anymore and stuff. Can you go through the whole like keeping up with the advancements, even though they're in you? Like, is there updates that need to be done? Do they glitch? Do they malfunction?
No, I've never had any real malfunctions with one. Either they work or they don't. And there's really no updates because the updates would actually be done at the receivers that are interfacing to the chips, not the chips themselves. The chips are set according to a standard, and it's basically just data that you can write. So let's go back to the idea of an access badge. You know, you can work at the same company for 10 years and have the same badge, right? You don't necessarily have to every year or every 3 years, like with a credit card, go into your human resources department and go, okay, here's this badge is expired. Give me my new one. That's because, and that's not to say that there isn't security advancements in the physical access protocols, but they would be done through the actual controller systems and at the readers, not at the card itself. The card itself is just holding a record, and it's what that receiver does with that record. That's where the implications come
When you said like obviously your implant went defect,
in.
how then do you get
How do I deal with it?
how do you get the abilities back more? Do you have to get it out and then a new thing put in, or is there a way of
Absolutely. Yep. You hit the nail right on the head. Even when it came to the credit card, I knew up front that just like any other credit cards do have to be replaced every 3 years. So you would need to go through at least one medical procedure every 3 years in order to be able to use this card. In terms of getting them replaced, I just go back to the exact same guy who put them in. In my case, it's a gentleman by the name of Pineapple Tangora, and he runs a body modification parlor in Austin, Texas called Shaman Modification. Got to give free shout out to my mechanic. But I remember, we had discussed before we started talking, you said that you would went out trying to find information on where you could get these things done. And that's one thing that I did want to include in our discussion here is some resources for people if they may find this stuff interesting. The first and foremost, if you ask me, the best, and this is just me talking in my opinion, the best resource available would be my book, Human Hacked. My life and lessons as the world's first augmented ethical hacker, available on Amazon and Barnes and Noble and anywhere great books are sold. We have it in ebook as well as audiobook. Okay, had to do that. You got to do that kind of stuff. But beyond that, well, if you do get by the book, in the back in the index, I have a complete glossary of all of the main web based resources for transhumanism. You can also, the best advice I would give is dangerousthings.com has a forum. That is probably the largest single collection of information that you're going to find. There are threads in there, and stop looking for doctors, look for installers. And there's an entire thread on where you can go along with maps of Europe as well as Latin America, North America, Canada. Website that I would recommend is called biohack.me. And this is where you'll find information about Grindfest that happens every year, along with some of the people I had mentioned earlier, like Grindhouse Wetware, some of our founding people in this movement, like Rich Lee. I mean, I'm just the latest in a line of more people that came before me. And the scary part is not only do I think that we're going to see more of this over the next 5 to 7 years, I figure within the next 5 years, people are going to look at what I'm doing today, and I'm going to be looked at as a relic and a dinosaur because I do feel the technology is going to move that fast. And I don't necessarily know if I want to upgrade all of these. Being the guy that kind of brought it to light, they kind of have a little bit of personal significance beyond just the technical ability.
I know I mentioned earlier about convenience, but there's one area of life in my head that I'm thinking that it can't be convenient for. And you showed me like before we recorded about your conference passes and stuff, but surely going through any kind of security must be a pain in the ass. Like, do they just roll out the red carpet and go get in the back of the van? You're going there at 51, or what goes on?
No, they honestly they can't ask. Like I said before, the fact that these are inside my body gives me medical and health data privacy through HIPAA and GDPR. So all I have to do is say it's medical, and they have to go, okay. So the honest answer of how do I get through airports is very simple: left foot, right foot, left foot, right foot, left foot, right foot. And the scary part is, prior to last year, and I've had these in my body for quite a few years, prior to actually needing a full knee replacement, a medical knee replacement done on my left knee a year ago, I had been walking through just the little magnetometers and not setting them off. Because one thing you have to keep in mind is these are microchips, which are predominantly silica or sand. They're not metal. Biggest single bit of metal is the magnet that's in my pinky, and that's not even the size of a pea. And that's an iron core wrapped in titanium. But don't quote me on this because it's been a long, long time. But I used to do the job of like the TSA or the screening agents at the airports when I was younger, and I've been out of that for, God, 35, 40 years. Back when I was doing it, I want to say you needed to have the total combined metallic weight of a 22 caliber bullet in order to set off the magnetometers. And this thing where you're standing there and they scan you, that's not an X-ray. That's a density scanner. It's looking for bulk between your body and the outside of your clothes. It's not looking through your skin. The other frequently asked question that I usually get is, are these the same chips that are in my dog and my cat? And it's the same technology, just not the same usage.
You mentioned that, I don't know if anyone else caught it, but I did, that your chip in your arm is the biggest you have yet. So are you planning on going further, and how far away really are you from getting the chip in the head, that Neuralink?
Well, the funny thing is I actually sent, please excuse my birds. My peacocks decided they wanted to be part of the podcast. To answer your question, it's a two-part answer. I have actually sent requests out. I have emailed, I have called Synchron and asked them if they were interested in having a control subject that didn't have any type of deficiencies, and they would like someone that's, perfectly healthy. I don't know about perfectly healthy, but
Getting there.
healthy enough. If they would like to have a control patient, I volunteered, and I couldn't get them to respond to me. So I've already tried getting the brain computer interface. And in terms of what I'm doing myself, I am actually in the process of working to implant a Raspberry Pi Zero W in my arm that will be running Kali or Parrot. So that way, one thing you have to understand about my current implants and my attack vectors that I have is I need another device in order to be able to make the attack. I need something that's going to act as the receiver to read my implants. So I am in a passive state at all times. What I'd like to do is get the Raspberry Pi in my arm. So that way, if let's say I'm at a conference doing a speech, I could actually be doing low energy Bluetooth sweeps. I could be doing auto pones while I'm talking. Nobody would be any the wiser because it's actually coming from inside my body. And once again, if it's inside my body, all I have to do is claim medical, and I can keep the authorities away from what I'm actually doing. And the one thing that one of the main reasons that I keep pushing this envelope and I keep having conversations like this with people like you is most people out there don't even know that this is a real thing, let alone the fact that there is potentially over 100,000 of us out there walking the world with these types of capabilities. That's not to say that every one of us that has an implant automatically makes us a bad guy. Most people are using these, to be able to get into their gym, to get into their apartment, to get into work. They're using them for completely normal, legit reasons. And to that point, being augmented should not mean that you are an immediate automatic threat. That's like saying anyone who drives a car is a potential vehicular manslaughter subject. It just hasn't happened yet. And I think a lot of that comes in due to puritanical beliefs, culture, things like that. If somebody needs a pacemaker or, a continuous glucose pump for diabetes, people don't look at them as if they're immoral or a danger. But the minute you choose to do things like me, where I'm trying to enhance my condition and go beyond what the human form is expected, I'm looked at with fear and skepticism, to the point where I was actually called out on one Christian extremist website for having the mark of the beast because of the credit card in my hand. Whoever figured that the mark of the beast was Visa?
You told me that earlier, and it's been stuck in my head because I know for a fact in about a year's time that other one, the big circle one on your hand, is going to be the next one they call. It's going to be the next one. It looks very like something, so they're going to say that. But you mentioned obviously like the Bluetooth sweeping and things that you can do. Like you can get into buildings. You don't need to really like, go in and out, and there is convenience. I can understand why you would do it if you're interested in tech and you're like for general convenience. It is definitely a thing because it will be a big thing in the future for convenience. But do you have anything that like you can do with them that like almost like a party trick, something you can fling out and impress somebody with?
Well, usually I normally have a flipper zero. If you've ever seen one of those, it's a little RFID gadget, and I'll actually sit there and let people read my chips while I'm sitting at the bar. The magnet's always a great bar trick, but honestly, due to the fact that most laws are written as such that if I get into someone else's technology without express permission, that's breaking the law. So I usually keep all of my chips completely empty at all times unless I'm actually planning to do something with them. And I can actually program them on the fly with my cell phone, and I keep a list in a library of different attacks ready to go.
I do kind of want to go back to this whole procedure because there is one part of it now that is fascinating me. Like, the health anxiety is running through my head like a freight train here at the moment. But the I know obviously with piercings and anybody who's listening from the UK and Ireland will remember getting boosters in school and you had to look after them for about a week because they could get infected so easy. But your implants and your body modifications, what's the aftercare like? Because obviously you're going to want to keep it as pristine as possible because you're going to have uses for it. It's like actual tech.
Honestly, not that much. I mean, I use kind of like what I would do for a tattoo. Once the procedure's over, the mechanic usually will just put a band-aid over it. I'll come home and I use Tegaderm, which is kind of like the plastic skin that they put over you after a surgery instead of a bandage. The larger procedures, I learned the hard way. The only medical complication I have had from any of my procedures was I was an idiot. Anytime you're going to have any surgical procedure of any kind, or, a heavy trauma to some place, what's the first thing they tell you? Get on it, some Motrin to reduce the inflammation. It's going to be traumatic to the area. It's going to try and swell. Well, I'm from the streets of Detroit. I don't need to do that. So when I did get the large flex next in the top of my hand, my mechanic was like, remember, start taking Motrin at least a day to 2 days beforehand. Keep taking it through, 2, 3 days after. Well, I don't need to do that. I'm tough. So I went to bed that first night and I woke up the next day with what looked like half of a softball on the top of my hand. I mean, it was about that, I'll give you inches. Again, I missed the day we switched to metric. Well, actually, no, wait a minute. 1 inch is 20, what is it, 25.4 millimeters? I don't know.
Yeah.
But it was at least an inch and a half off of my hand of nothing but fluid and swelling. And I did contact my primary physician and went in, and they took one look at it and went, "Oh my God, we have to get you into surgery and get that out of there." I was like, "What are you talking about, man? Just give me some strong Motrin. I paid a lot of money to put this in here yesterday. We're not taking it out. We need to take it out." I was like, "You're not going to give me the prescription?" No. Okay. Went over to the pharmacy, just bought the over the counter stuff, took it for about a week and a half, and the swelling went down, and that was the end of it. But normal aftercare for most of these is really not that bad, especially the hypodermic style or the needle gauntlet style. They're quick, they're relatively painless, and there's really not much aftercare because the wound is honestly not bigger than, like I said, about the size of a large pen. As long as you can cover that up, not allow anything to get in there until you get a scab over it, it's pretty simple healing.
So I need to finish this off with a banger question, mainly because I'm about to hyperventilate with my health anxiety going through the roof. But so
I'm sorry about that, man.
I done it to myself anyway. But if you could warn the world about one thing that's coming in the world of tech, what would it be?
The loss of our individuality, the loss of our personal freedoms, the loss of ourselves. The amount of data that is being collected upon us just through our normal everyday usages of the internet. There are companies out there, and I'm not going to get into specific ones, you can do your own research, but they have built digital profiles of us that can do predictive analytics with a success ratio of over 85%. So all of the things that we think that make us unique are now being exploited as marketing tools. So my suggestion, and the thing that I fear most, is the loss of individuality and the loss of who we are as individuals within this world. So my advice would be, remember, some things should be private. Some things you should keep to yourself. Though in the future, I think actual truth is going to be the most valuable commodity in the world.
Give me goosebumps a little bit there, but this is your moment. Plug where you are, plug everything. We've already plugged the book, so don't fucking plug that again, but plug everything.
Uh, Well, on top of the book, we do have a brand new documentary that's going to be coming out. We're debuting it at DEF CON this year, and then we're going to be submitting it to the film festivals. It's on me. It's called I Am Machine. We actually videotaped an actual installation, so that's going to be a part of it. My website is www.i. My current schedule is there. I'm going to be doing an event next month in Dubai. We've got other events coming up in Croatia. I've got an event coming up in India. Check the website, hit my Substack at Len Noe, Twitter at hacker_213, and LinkedIn at Lennoe. I really appreciate your time. Maybe we can talk again after the documentary comes out. We'll see how your health and anxieties then.